What's going on? Welcome into the Matt Bernier Show, part of the In the Money Media Network. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Today is Monday, January the 11th, 2021. This is episode 48 of the program. However you listen to this thing, thank you for doing so. Number of ways to find the podcast. If you listen audio only, you have Apple Podcasts, you have Spotify, you have SoundCloud. You also have InTheMoneyPodcast.com. You can find this show along with the flagship show, the Players Podcast, along with Talk Racing to Me with Naomi Tucker, along with the Red Board Rewind with Spencer Lugenbuehl, along with Nick Luck's Daily Podcast, and much, much more. All available, all for free, over on InTheMoneyPodcast.com. You can also get involved with In the Money Plus. I would encourage you to take a look at that. If you are someone who watches as well as listens, over on YouTube, all you need to do, search bar, Matt Bernier Show. This episode will come up along with the 47 prior. However you listen, please rate, review, subscribe. If it's podcast feed, if it's YouTube, thumbs up, thumbs down, the whole shebang. The more the merrier. All that helps us out in a big, big way. I would also encourage you to head on over to my own personal YouTube channel, Matt Bernier. Please subscribe. And however you are on YouTube, or if you are on YouTube and you listen, especially if you comment, not just for the Friday feature, but just in general, thoughts, observations, opinions, make sure the bell icon is lit up, because if someone replies to you, you want to know if you got some sort of back and forth. And if the bell icon's not lit up, you're not going to know unless you just go and search it out on your own. So make sure that bell icon is lit up. You'll get notified anytime somebody comments on a comment that you left, or anytime new content is uploaded, whether it's the In the Money channel or over on my own personal one as well. For this week's show, first thing, a little bit of an early look at the Pegasus World Cup. Just about 2 weeks out from that, looking forward. I'm going to head down there to Gulfstream Park, going to help out with the NBC broadcast down there. Looking forward to some warmer weather than what I have here in the Northeast. We will then follow it up with the Friday feature. This Friday, it's going to be the 7th race from Aqueduct, and Aaron Reed's going to help us out to go over that race. I think it's a nice salty N2X. You've got those nice. It's a really sweet little tweener where you've got some of the old hard-hitting vets that can still throw, the fastball might not be 100 anymore, but it's still low mid-90s. Then you got some of these young kids who are less proven, but the upside is there, the potential is there. So I think that's going to be a fun race to go over. If you want to be involved in the Friday feature for next Monday's recording, you need to leave your selection beneath the video player on YouTube. It's the only way I will take a selection. And if you are correct in identifying the winner, the big A on Friday, I'll contact you and we'll set up a time to record next week so you can be in Aaron's position again. We'll also wrap things up with, and actually, oddly enough, there's a funny little piece about, I already recorded the Friday feature with Aaron, and we were discussing a little bit of football. He happens to be an Indianapolis Colts fan, and I brought up something that ended up being pretty prescient. I think it was within about 35 or 40 minutes after that recording was concluded, I had mentioned, the Eagles, it's a little bit shaky with Doug Peterson. He's been relieved of his duties. So oddly enough, if you hear that and you wonder why I'm speculating, it's because that news broke probably 35 minutes after we got done speaking. So neither here nor there. And we'll wrap things up with the $500 challenge. Effectively a week in the books. And I it's part of the reason that I didn't want to have any super hard rules that it needs to be 7 days a week or any of that kind of jazz, because last week I believe there were 4 days worth of plays. I'll go over, kind of update where things are, try to route you or steer you in the direction of where you can find the plays that go toward the $500 challenge, and just overall thoughts on how the first, we're getting back on the beam. Got to get back on the horse after the disaster that was the first time through. And the first week it was a little bit slow, but a lot of, I personally believe, and this isn't just me trying to make excuses for things, I think kind of unlucky with a couple of spots, some questionable rides, some tough trips that could easily turn the ledger in a pretty dramatic way. So we'll go into that at the end of the show and kind of, again, get you in the right direction if you're looking for those plays. Those will be out a couple times this week anyway. But before we get into that, let's start off with the Pegasus talk. Now, we've got the Pegasus World Cup Dirt as well as the Pegasus World Cup Turf. I'm not going to do a ton on the turf. And again, we are still days in advance of the actual field being drawn. We have invitations, and they continue to be updated with horses defecting and things like that. The turf, the reason I'm not going to go into it too much, to be honest, I think it's the better of the two races if all these horses do end up showing up. But I think the dirt race for me has a larger has a larger scope in what could be and what may be expected, or I'm hopeful for anyway, for the balance of 2021. And in a weird way, it really has nothing to do with the horses that are running in the race specifically. It's what the race sort of means right now for the older division, as far as, well, the older division. I'll leave it at that. And what do I mean by that? I take a look at this list of invites. If both Bafferts, which one of them, Mucho Gusto, has been retired, it sounds like Charlatan is going to pass on this race and wait for the Saudi Cup, which is going to be a one-turn mile and an eighth. Personally, I think that's a better call, but that's another story for another day. You take those two horses out, and the main body list of invites for the dirt race, it's a fun race, but I don't think anyone's going to mistaken it for an all-time showdown of upper echelon talent. You have a couple horses who have drawn in from the reserve invitees to the main body invitees at this point in Math Wizard and King Guillermo. So that leaves right now, if this field as currently constituted were to go to post, you would be looking at Code of Honor, Harper's First Ride, Jesus' Team, Kiss Today Goodbye, Knicks Go, Mr. Freeze, Sleepy Eyes Todd, Tax, True Timber, Math Wizard, and King Guillermo. Again, from a gambling standpoint and from just a pure horse racing standpoint, the race itself, pretty solid group put together. Grade 1, fringe, but all in all, a pretty solid group. You're going to have multiple options. You can have a few different ways. I don't think you're going to have a prohibitive favorite. If this is the field that ends up going, I think you're probably looking at either Code of Honor or Knicks Go going off as favored, with Tax probably just in behind them. That's assuming all these horses go. But the reason that I wanted to kind of get a jump on this race, about 2 weeks in advance of it being run, you go through. I'm going to rattle off the 5 most recent Beyer speed figures for each of these horses. I'm going to do it very, very quickly. Code of Honor, 101, 106, 99, 102, 101. Harper's First Ride, 100, 190, 101, 96. Jesus' Team, 97, 102, 91, 92, 95. Kiss Today Goodbye, 98, 93, 89, 84, 101. K-Nix Go, I'm only going to go with 3 because these are the 3 races since he has been in Brad Cox's barn. They also came after a lengthy layoff. 108, 107, 100. Mr. Freeze, 98, 97, 96, 92, 96. Sleepy Eyes Todd, 100, 98, 90, 102, 99. Tax, 105, 92, 83, 101, 98. True Timber, 106, 95, 81, 98, 91. Math Wizard, 96, 82, 85, 100, 91. And King Guillermo, 85, 93, 99, 82, 88. None of those speed figures, with the exception of perhaps the 2 most recent ones that Knicks Go has earned, the ones that are in the high 100 range, none of those are going to blow your socks off. And in all reality, none of those are going to win major Grade 1 races going forward, with the exception of those 2 from Knicks Go. And perhaps if you want to throw in the 106 from Code of Honor 2 starts back, and if you want to throw in the 105 from Tax in his most recent run down there at Gulfstream. I am glossing over True Timber's 106 that he earned winning the Cigar because it's a one-turn mile, and I think it's apples to oranges compared to what he's going to have to deal with next Saturday, not this coming Saturday. So as far as the race itself is concerned, fine. Everything looks great. But what does this mean long-term? To me, it's just more of an indictment on the fact that the older division is barren. If this is the best of the best, and I recognize if Charlatan were in here, you're probably talking about a different story. But if I'm being honest, I don't know what Charlatan's best game is going to be. It's far too early. The sample is far too small to definitively say that he's going to absolutely be a better horse as they go longer. He's only done it, once, twice? And I think there's I don't want to say a confirmed reason that they're going to go to Saudi Arabia as opposed to run here at Gulfstream. I recognize timing, things are going to be a little bit more beneficial, but I can't help but notice that, again, they're sticking to the one-turn race. There may be something to that, but I digress. When you look at this field, if this is going to be the group of older horses that are going to contest some of the bigger races that we have in the calendar in 2021, specifically for older horses, then it's a very, very hungry group. Now, you can always have the 3-year-olds jump up in a large way. Who knows? maybe these 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds who, a horse like Tax, who had a very abbreviated campaign last year, maybe he's really ready to flourish and turn into something else. But I tweeted it when Tiz the Law was retired. You take Tiz the Law out of that equation, and while I had said he didn't really, to me, progress as a 3-year-old, that didn't mean that he wasn't going to be a major player in races like this. It's a very, very... It's not a weak group, but it is not an all-time group by any stretch. And I think the door is not just open, the door is kicked down. And I would hope, and this is really where I'm going with this whole little open, the door is kicked down for the new connections, the folks that spent $9.5 million, Spendthrift Farm. The door is kicked down to take a horse like Monomoy Girl, who is already a Hall of Famer, who is already one of the better race mares we've seen in the past handful of years, let's say 10 to 15 years. She does. She belongs in the Beholder, the Zenyatta, the Rachel Alexandra territory. To me, the door is blown open for her to go from, which is already rarefied air, to possibly putting herself in the annals of time as far as doing something exceptionally special. Because we've seen 3-year-old fillies, specifically Rachel Alexandra in recent years, go through and beat the boys on multiple occasions. But it was, with the exception of the Woodward, it was 3-year-old restricted races. When was the last time we saw an older filly or mare not just take on the boys, but take them on regularly? And this is not a conversation for the folks who, too often I see whenever anybody suggests the idea of the girls against the boys, oh, well, just let them run against the girls, and there are plenty of good races for them to win. I get all that. But typically you're talking about 3-year-olds and horses who might try the Derby as opposed to the Oaks and things like that. Monomoy Girl legitimately has nothing to gain other than money for her new connections to just to win all the girls' races again. What does another Breeders' Cup Distaff do for her? Does a third one really take her from this to this? Maybe it does. But you know what could take her from this to this? Putting together some sort of a campaign where she takes on males multiple times and wins, culminating in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I don't know if the connections have any intention of doing this. I can't imagine they would have brought her back to not try to do something special with her. And if you want to say the distance at 1.25 miles is an unknown, sure. She's never done it before, I don't believe, offhand. Her only trip to Saratoga was the Coaching Club American Oaks, and that was at 1.1 miles. So unless I'm forgetting something, and I can pull up her PPs really quickly, she's never gone 1.25 miles. She's gone 1.1 miles a few times. It sounds like, I believe I read a story in the Thoroughbred Daily News that Brad Cox and company, they've got her back. She was always in training, but it was just kind of light stuff. They're starting to really get her ramped up. The goal is the Bayakoa on February 15th down at Oaklawn Park. And I can understand not wanting to bring her back in a spot like the Pegasus, only a relatively quick turnaround these days. But let's say the Bayakoa is the starting off point. I've put together what I would love to see as a campaign for a horse like Monomoy Girl, who, again, depending on how you want to look at it, if you think there is a great deal to be gained by winning the same races 2-3 times, great, that's fine. I don't think it's going to make a difference for her legacy one way or the other. She's already a Hall of Famer for all the reasons I laid out. But if she were to go and beat the boys on multiple occasions, even if it is a group of, let's say, average older males, it's still going to put her in genuine rarefied air. So if this was what the connections had in mind, or this is something that they're kicking the tires on, a campaign that I'm thinking that I would love to see, that I think would be phenomenal for a horse like Monomoy Girl. And I'm curious what all your thoughts are on Twitter at Bernier_Matt or beneath the video player on YouTube. She comes back in the Bayakoa on February 15th. You would imagine it's nothing more than a means to an end to get to the Apple Blossom against females. That race is going to be run in April. At that point, that's when I think the schedule, if you really want it to be an all-timer, that's when you got to crank it up a little bit. And also recognizing she's run only 15 times. And I get it that she had she missed a year and a half because of injury. But they don't run her terribly frequently. So I think you're probably looking at a campaign of no more than 5 to 6 races. And I think that's pushing it. It's probably going to be closer to 5. But I would love to see something like this put together. You're running the Bayakoa, you're running the Apple Blossom. The Apple Blossom's in April. You give her a month. You bring her back in the Met Mile. She has shown her affinity for the one turn. I believe Brad Cox is on record saying she's at her best when she's at one turn. Who knows? Perhaps you get a showdown with a horse like Charlatan. Perhaps you get other giant horses who show up in that race who just the one-turn mile seems to hit them between the eyes. It would be a phenomenal test to see. Let's say she goes there, win, lose, or draw. She comes out of it. She's in good shape. She's been to Saratoga one time in her career. That was winning the CCA Oaks as a 3-year-old at 1 1/8. What better opportunity to add to a resume, a Hall of Fame resume already, but really to try to stamp your, seal as perhaps, you can count on 2 hands where she would fit. Run her in the Whitney at 1 1/8 against males. The track's not an issue. The distance isn't an issue. And in theory, depending on to me, that would be the prime opportunity where, let's say you ran those first 3 races, you run in the Whitney. Now you have the choice to either give her 2 months off before the Breeders' Cup and come in fresh. And look, firing fresh is not a problem for this girl. Or if you really wanted to, you could run her in September. And assuming you wanted a race, let's say you ran in the Whitney and you passed on September, you trained her up to the Breeders' Cup. Perfect. Run her in the Classic at 1 1/4. If you didn't want to run in the Whitney following an effort in the Met Mile, but you wanted to get a prep into her, which we've seen on 2 occasions, the 2 years that she's won the Breeders' Cup Distaff. The 3-year-old campaign, she ran in the Cotillion, which was in the middle of September, and roughly 6 weeks later, she ran in the Breeders' Cup Distaff and won. This past year, she ran in the La Troyenne, which was the first weekend in September, and then came back 8 weeks later and won the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So a 6 to 8 week window for the 2 years that she won the Distaff. Keeping in mind, the La Troyenne is not going to be an option for you, knock on wood, barring something ridiculous happening in 2021. The only reason that the chips fell the way that they did was because of COVID, as far as that race being an option at that point in the year. Typically, if it's not that race, you're probably looking at a race like the Zenyatta out at Santa Anita, but I cannot imagine the Connections wanting to ship her from, I assume she'll be based at Churchill, as she has been, or Keeneland, one of the two. I can't imagine them wanting to ship her out there for a race in September, back home, and then back out in November. And I couldn't see them leaving her out there for 6, 7, 8 weeks. So then that would open up the possibility of a place like Churchill Downs opening up some sort of a race that they write for her. It wouldn't be the first time, and it won't be the last time, and I don't have a problem with it. They write a race for her at 1 1/16 or whatever the Connections would like the race to be at, and it's effectively just a prep. It's nothing more than to shake the rust off and get her ready for a run in the Breeders' Cup. I'm at the point now where if it's anything other than the Classic, I'll be very, very disappointed. It'll be great to see. It's always great to see great athletes perform at the highest level. But the Distaff, a 3rd Distaff for me is fine, great. You're already better than all of them. Barring some 3-year-old fillies or newly turned 4-year-old fillies that jump up in a big way. The Classic, though, going a distance you've never run, at a track you've never run at Del Mar, against the males, you all of a sudden, her resume would be every bit as good, if not better, than a horse like Zenyatta's. And does she have the fanfare of a Zenyatta? No, I don't know if any other horse will ever have the fanfare that Zenyatta did. But just soup to nuts, you, I don't know how you could argue that a campaign, and let's not even say that she runs against the boys at any point until the Classic. 2 distaffs and a Classic, along with all the other accolades along the way, that's probably the best Fillier-Mare resume that we've seen in 20 years, including Beholder's, who I think Beholder is probably the best of the lot. Better than Zenyatta, better than Rachel Alexandra when they were all at their best. So that's the reason, or part of the reason, that I think next Saturday, the Pegasus World Cup, I think that race is not just important for those horses that are running in it and shaping the division going forward, but I think it's really, really important for the likes of a Monomoy Girl. If something crazy happens in the Pegasus from a result standpoint, then there is no excuse for Monomoy Girl not to be running in some of these kind of races. The Met Mile, the Whitney, things like that. And obviously the Breeders' Cup Classic. If you get a blowout performance from Tax and he takes his game to the next level and he earns a low 1-teen buyer, okay, you have a worthy opponent. If Charlatan goes to the Middle East and puts on a show, fair? Totally get it. I'm not even factoring in the possibility of a horse like Monomoy Girl running in Dubai. I just don't see that being a thing, but you never know. But boy, how fun would a campaign of the Bayakoa, the Apple Blossom, the Met Mile, the Whitney, and the Breeders' Cup Classic be? Because I tell you what, barring someone jumping up in a giant way, she's got to be among the favorites for all of those races, if not the outright favorite. And understanding that some of these horses can improve in a big, big way. And from a speed figure standpoint, that's the most incredible thing about a horse like Monomoy Girl. She is far from the fastest thing you've ever seen if you're just strictly a numbers player. But there is something to be said about a horse that just wants to go out and win. And she's crossed the wire first on 14 occasions. She was disqualified 1 time. And in her career debut, she finished second by a neck. She wins races. That's all she does. On the lead, off the lead, whatever it may be. So this Pegasus World Cup may not be loaded with Hall of Famers, but I think it could have major ramifications for a future Hall of Famer. Let me know what your thoughts are about the race itself and the thoughts of Monomoy Girl in 2021. Beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Now, let's pivot to some more, I'm trying to think of, not more recent, but some racing that's actually coming up a little bit sooner. Coming up on Friday at Aqueduct, race number 7. It's a 1-turn mile. Now winners of 2 other than Aaron Reed, here to help us out with the Friday feature. If you want to be in Aaron's position next Monday, leave your selection beneath the video player on YouTube. I will contact you if you are correct, and we'll set up a time to record. First things first, we got to get through this week's. Here it is, the Friday feature from Aqueduct. All right, Friday feature time. This week's guest, Aaron Reed. He was the winner, 1 of 2 last week that correctly identified the winner down at Tampa Bay Downs in the feature down there. That was race number 8. That was 6 furlongs on the main track. This is going to be a little bit different. We haven't been to New York in a while, and this looks like it's a nice full race. You've got 10 signed on, scheduled to go anyway, at Aqueduct on Friday afternoon. Aaron Reed, first things first, before we get into that, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Matt, and appreciate the opportunity.
No, I appreciate you taking some time out here on a Monday afternoon to chop up some racing. We were just talking a little bit about the weekend that was as far as football is concerned. You said you were taking a look at this race during the midst of that, what effectively was a blowout last night with the Browns and the Steelers. I know the final score, and maybe there early in the fourth quarter it got a little bit tighter, but effectively a blowout. And unfortunately for you, a Colts fan, what were the overall thoughts over the course of that game against Buffalo on Saturday?
It felt like one of those games where there were just little mistakes, little things all along the way eventually added up to a loss. They had a chance to kick a field goal early, and they didn't take it. So then they were chasing points the rest of the way. They went for 2 in a position where it didn't seem to make any sense, and then they just they challenged a call that was clearly not going to get overturned and wasted a timeout, and they wasted another timeout in the third quarter. So lots of little things added up to a 3-point loss, unfortunately, because they caught the Bills, quite frankly, on an off day.
And as far as all the chatter sort of surrounding the quarterback situation is concerned, I mean, you as a Colts fan, I guess I'll give you two options. Well, I shouldn't say two options. A, would you be disappointed if Phillip Rivers decided to come back and sign another one-year deal?
I wouldn't be disappointed, but I wouldn't be excited either. If they had somebody waiting in the wings that was a surefire guy to go to, then I would be disappointed. But right now they don't. So,
And I suppose that kind of takes that second piece, or the second part, we'll go with part B. You know, you hear the chatter about Carson Wentz, and who knows what happens with Doug Peterson in Philadelphia, what they end up doing there. But the Colts have a ton of cap room. They would be one of the teams, and obviously the Frank Reich situation, we know that connection. I mean, as a Colts fan, is the idea of Carson Wentz appealing at a giant number and based on what we've seen, or the lack thereof of what we've seen this past year?
I would probably rather go to door number 3, whatever that may be. Wentz doesn't excite. Now, granted, he'll certainly have a better team around him in Indianapolis than he had in Philadelphia, so he could revert back to being a better quarterback. But it is a rough year to watch Carson this year.
Yeah, especially for a guy who you know what he's capable of at his best. To me and my friends all going back and forth, and here we are, call it Monday morning quarterbacks or whatever you will. We look at it and say, he didn't make those sort of mistakes or those sort of throws or those sort of decisions. I mean, you had the year that he was going to win the MVP had he not blown out his knee. And then even the year that he came back, he was very, very competent. This year, it just seemed like he lost his confidence all around, and it seems like that situation in Philadelphia is a little bit sideways. So we'll see what happens. That'll be an interesting sort of side story to watch as we go into the offseason. There's still plenty of football left to be played, though. As far as racing is concerned, before we get into Race 7 at Aqueduct on Friday, overall, what's your background? How did you get involved in racing? Did you grow up into it? What's sort of your story?
Yeah, well, I had I'd watched it casually growing up. I'm in Indianapolis, grew up in Indiana, not too far from Kentucky. So we pay attention to big races a little bit, but really how I got into it, my father-in-law, when I met my wife, she's from Evansville, Indiana, which is Ellis Park territory. And my father-in-law was actually a teller there in the summers. He worked in the school system his whole career. And so he had summers basically off, and he worked as a teller at Ellis Park. So whenever we would go to see her parents before we got married, and then since, he'd always want to go to the OTB or go out to Ellis Park. And that's kind of where it started. And then I actually, totally unrelated, I had a cousin who got involved in the ownership side, in an Indiana bred here who was really successful horse called Hoosier Kingdom. He back about 10 years ago at least now. And then that started interest in the ownership side, and so I got involved myself, and a few other guys got involved, pulled a kind of a partnership together, and we've owned horses now for the better part of 10 years. We've got had some success. We had a stakes winner. Polar Vortex was a routing filly here, a 3-year-old stakes winner, and then we've had a couple others that she was actually a homebred. We bred her as well, and we kept her on now as a brood mare. So we've got horses coming along, and then recently in the last 2 years, we've joined up with Iron Horse Racing.
Yep.
And bought in on some of their partnerships. They've got a great no markup program that is really a fantastic opportunity to get in incrementally. It's a lot less of a financial commitment, quite frankly, than the partnerships that we've been doing before that. So you could spread yourself out a little bit. And we've had some success there too. So it's been good.
And that was actually going to be my next question. I've heard, and I'm sure every instance is unique to the individual, whether it's a good experience, a tough experience, for a number of different reasons. I've heard some people say that the ownership side of things has really brought a different sort of viewpoint for them as far as the thoroughbred itself is concerned, never mind the races and any of that kind of stuff. But then I've also heard the opposite side of the coin where, for whatever reason, unfortunately, the horse that they're involved with just has constant issues, can't get to the racetrack, and it becomes not only a financial burden, but it becomes kind of discouraging, and then they take sort of, I don't want to say a negative view of things, but they're kind of, they're put off by it. And it sounds like you have been fortunate to have a pretty solid experience thus far.
We have overall. I mean, overall, if you look at it financially over the 10 years, I think we're probably about break even, which is a win really in the ownership game. I mean, it's it's not it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, we've had, a horse we claimed for a decent chunk of money, never do anything. We've had other horses that just became unproductive and we had to retire and so forth. But we've also had, a couple really home runs that have kept the whole operation afloat. So, um, it's definitely a game of highs and lows, and there's a lot more lows than highs, and it takes a lot of patience. But we're involved with a horse, Hope Springs Eternal. We're involved with one with Iron Horse, who's hopefully going to start down here at Gulfstream Park in the next week or two. 3-year-old colt. So we're hoping that he does well, and we've got another winner on our hands, but we'll see.
And you talk about how the game is full of highs and many, many lows. Not so different than the handicapping game. We have some highs and we have many, many lows. Hopefully we have a high here on Friday. Let's talk about this race 7 at Aqueduct. It's a 1-turn mile. Non-winners of 2 other than, for earlier mid-January, I think this is a pretty good group of horses put together. You've got some horses who have a little bit of stakes experience. You have some that can't quite necessarily hack it at that stakes level, but this spot, this is kind of they're there. I would like to think of them, and it's not a great analogy, but almost the AAA level as far as the comparison between horse racing and baseball. Baseball, I understand. The AAA players, you either have sort of your journeymen or you have your young up-and-comers who they're not quite ready for the bigs, but they're certainly excelling at a rate that they need to get through A or AA ball. And I kind of feel like you might have a little bit of a mix of that here, where you've got some of those old salty vets who they can't quite hack it at that next level, but they are far better than dropping in for a $25,000 claiming tag. But you've also got some younger, less experienced runners who knows, maybe if things all kind of come together, maybe they can take that next step forward. From a handicapping standpoint, not just this race, but overall, what's your approach? Are you a pace player? Are you a class player? Replays, that sort of thing?
A little bit of all that, but I always start with pace. I always want to try to figure out in my mind who's going to be on the lead and what the race shape's going to look like. Are they going to have a lonely, easy lead? Or is there a bunch of pressure? Are there bona fide closers? Just try to really figure out the pace of the race. And then I start looking at class. Are they jumping up? This race is a great example where you've got stakes horses running that still have allowance conditions that are running. You've got high price claimers that are jumping up into allowance. You got a whole mix of class there. And then I also look at replays. I don't look at every single horse and all the replays. If I see a trouble line, I'll go back and look at the replay to see if that trouble line really happened or happened the way it's described. Or occasionally I like to try to see if there's trouble that was, maybe missed or understated. So that's kind of the way I look at replay. I don't have the time to really go through and look at all the replays, but I'd like to.
I think the replay piece, you specifically the one that you bring up, where you take a look at that short comment line and you kind of go through to either check or confirm or deny that was actually the case. I would strongly encourage folks, if you only rely on the short comment line, at least go back if there is a troubled trip. Or even if you have the opportunity to, go through and take a look, even if it's just the most recent run from some of these horses, because, and I'm not naming names and I'm not going to just sort of single out different jurisdictions, but certain chart callers are either very, very good or very, very bad. And that can go a long way to either determining whether a trip that, based on the short comment, sounds like it was a nightmare, ended up being very, very minor and nothing substantial. And conversely, one that looks like it's nothing really all that big can end up being a complete disaster and really be the difference between the horse running 3 or 4 lengths better than what they actually did. So I would strongly encourage folks, if you just rely on the short comment, if you have the ability to, whether it's one of the replay services or many ADWs have the option to just go through and watch replays, do yourself a favor and just at least a little bit more of a check there. So as far as this race goes, I think you laid it out very well. You've got some of those stakes horses who they've still got some of those allowance conditions. Maybe they're coming off of a lengthy layoff or whatever the case may be. Good spot, good return effort here. Maybe that springboards them to something else. And then we talked about some of those old salty vets who they can't quite hack it at that next level, but they're still very, very competitive. Where do you start with a race like this?
Well, yeah, so here I just started trying to figure out the pace. I saw really early on. I just started, from horse number one,
Mhm.
post 1 through 10. And it became really apparent to me really quickly that we've got a bunch of, horses that either need to lead or want the lead. And if they don't get it, they tend to not run as well as when they're on the lead. So then that in the back of my mind as I'm going through, then I started saying, okay, well, who's the mid pack types or who's the closer types that might be able to take advantage of that?
As far as the pace is concerned, Timeform US has it color-coded red, indicating that they believe it's going to be a swift pace, maybe helping horses coming from slightly off of it. Among the runners that figure to be in and amongst the early leaders, you have a horse like the number one Shotsky. You have a horse like a Ragtime Blues, who we haven't seen in a few months, but based on that one route effort, was just runoff speed for the most part. They make an equipment change there. High Velocity is a horse who's got a little bit of early foot, was forwardly placed at the same level at Aqueduct in the most recent start and just couldn't quite get the job done. You take a look at those three horses, that's not even including some of these other runners that have a little bit of early foot as well. I recognize a horse like Zoomer. I know a 1.125 to a one-turn mile. The speed isn't necessarily the same. It doesn't necessarily equal apples to apples. But another one who I can't imagine is going to be that far off of things. So you brought up sort of that second flight. Who in that second flight kind of attracted your attention?
Yeah, sure. I think another one on the speed real quick, Mad Money's is another one I think that'll show speed
Mm-hmm.
there in the 2 hole. I went to initially who caught my eye was the 5 Montauk Traffic, 7 Kumar, and the 10 Malibu Pro. I thought you can make a case for all three of these horses. I thought Montauk Traffic, he's kind of one you described the guy moving up from single A to double A to triple A. Lightly raced, second off a layoff, has upside, I think. That doesn't have the numbers yet, but has upside, just another jump forward, and he's got the speed figures to win this race. Kumar, I like cutting back to one turn. If you look at his best races, it's around one turn. I think his last one was 1.125 miles, and he just looked like he got tired. He was right there and just faded. And it's a second off a short layoff, and he's got a nice, strong 5 furlong work coming in. And I love the 5 furlong strong work, either 1 or 2 works back coming into a race. I think those are a lot more meaningful than the 4 furlong work. And the Malibu Pro, he's stepping up, but, from 40K. But when you look at his last race, he really ran strong, gets that cozy outside post, can let the whole race develop to his inside, and he's going to get the pace to close into. And he's only run twice at Aqueduct, but he got first in one race and second in the other, so he clearly likes the track. So that's where my eye went to in this race.
And just kind of going through those three horses from a possible post-time odds sort of situation, I feel like Montauk Traffic is the one that'll probably take a little bit more money than the other two that you just mentioned, simply because of the Linda Rice factor. This is a horse who, to your point, it's almost that double-edged sword where you can see that forward move coming. You know that he is inexperienced, but there's every right to believe, or every reason to believe, that he has the right to improve here. Second start off of a lengthy layoff, got a little bit of an equipment change. You almost wonder if he takes a little bit more money than necessarily he deserves to take against a group like this, because he hasn't run as fast as they have yet. That doesn't preclude him from winning, though. You bring up a horse like Kumar on the turn back, I agree with you. It just feels like maybe that distance was just call it a furlong too far for him. And now getting back specifically to the one-turn mile, he's won at N1X. Now, the N2X condition, we'll find out. Perhaps this level is going to be too much for him. But each of those two starts, 2 and 3 back at Belmont, I thought he ran really well in each of those. And from a figure standpoint, he's really not that far off. I'm really fascinated by the Malibu Pro argument, because this is an old salty vet. He's 8 years old, just newly turned 8-year-old gelding. He's never really run at this level competitively anyway. And frankly, he's never been at the N2X level in general. But it's one of those things that the way that he's coming into the race, I think he has every right to run big here, not only because he is one of the faster horses, but yes, stepping up in class is one thing. I like the run 2 back at Aqueduct in the one-turn mile, where he's not entirely outrun. He's only a couple lengths off of it. And with the speed signed on here, I think with that outside draw, I would imagine you're going to get some sort of a mid-flight trip. And if this thing turns into a bit of a stamina test, he's clearly going to have the bottom coming out of that 1.125 race. So I can certainly see the case for Malibu Pro. And to be honest, I think he's probably going to be the best price of the three.
I think he will too. I think Kumar will be you'll get a price there, and I think you will out of Malibu Pro. I've got a feeling you got horses in here with name recognition like Shotsky that's going to take money. I think Montauk Traffic, you're right. It just jumps off the page, the trainer stats, the equipment change, all those kind of things, the improvement you can see coming. And then even some, you look at a horse like Zoomer who really showed kind of a new dimension last time out. Really ran well, but I'm not sure the cutback to a mile helps him, and he's not going to get the lead here. And the third place finisher in that, I did look at some replays and some things, came out and kind of ran a dud last out. So I'm not sure how strong of a race that was, even though the number came back strong. But on paper, he looks like a real contender. So I think he'll take some money too. So if you're going to get your price in this race, unless maybe you bet on Shotsky, then he may go off at 8-5 or something. But big field, lots of possibilities. The only two horses I tossed, I didn't like Acker at all, and I can't. There was another one in here I didn't really care for. Might have been High Velocity, but or Empty Tomb. Neither one of those I really cared for either.
I think you bring up. I thought you brought up a good point too with Zoomer for folks who, if you're new to the game or whatever it may be, maybe from a pace standpoint, you're having a hard time really identifying horses who might be on the lead or close to it. A horse like Zoomer, just because he won in gate-to-wire fashion at 1 1/8 in the most recent start, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to have the speed to run with horses at a one-turn mile early on. And it's kind of evidenced. I understand those were 3/4 races and 7 furlong races leading into that stretch out, but he's never been a horse who is remotely close to the lead. And I think it's also worth noting, Aqueduct this time of year, the track is just very, very deep. It doesn't yield fast times. I think it's really, I don't want to call it kind of a horse for course time of year at Aqueduct, but it certainly takes an animal who has the ability to kind of be able to see out the distance. And if he has to use more speed early to stay with the other speeds that are projected to go in this race, even with the turn back in distance, I don't think that's a recipe for success. I agree with you. I think he probably sits about a length or two off the lead as well, maybe even farther back if he gets outrun and those other 3 or 4 really throw things down early. So we identified a few live contenders, a couple of nice prices in here, maybe a logical contender. If I had to hold your feet to the fire and you got to pick one, who's your pick for race 7 at Aqueduct on Friday?
Well, my pick in real time will be kind of dictated by the odds.
Sure.
Those 3 that I mentioned. But just sitting here today, I really like Malibu Pro. I think that he's going to jump up and run a big race. He's a salty old war horse like you talked about, and I'm not worried about him throwing in a dud. I mean, he's pretty consistent every time, even though he's running at cheaper levels. He's run the speed figures, and he's run against competition enough that he should be able to run an honest race. And then I would certainly look at 7 Kumar if he floats up as an exacta or even a trifecta with Montauk Traffic. And maybe if you like one of the speeds, like a Shotsky or Zoomer, maybe you throw them in the mix, but I would use them underneath.
Perfect 2 for 2 at Aqueduct, including a victory. 2 for 2 in the exacta, I should say, including a victory in the run. 2 starts back at this one-turn mile for the 10 Malibu Pro. Should be a nice price. And the Friday feature this week, race 7 at Aqueduct. If you want to be in Aaron's position next Monday, you need to leave your selection beneath the video player on YouTube. If you are correct, I will contact you. We will make something happen and set up a time. Maybe it will be Aaron again next Monday. Congratulations on last week, Aaron. Thank you for the time this afternoon, and good luck in Friday's race.
Hey, appreciate it. Appreciate the segment. It's always great to hear from other horse players out there and what they have to say about these races, because they definitely bring a new angle that I don't always see, for sure. Appreciate everything you do, Matt.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks to Aaron Reed for helping out with this week's Friday feature. Again, if you want to be in Aaron's position next Monday, you need to leave your selection for the 7th at Aqueduct this Friday beneath the video player on YouTube. If you are correct, I'll contact you and we will get things set up for next week. Now, we will wrap up this week's show, this episode 48, with an update as far as the $500 challenge is concerned. Now, this was something I brought back last week, figured turn of the year, turn of the calendar. Let's bring it back, hopefully perform a little bit better than the first time through did. Well, as far as the actual numbers are concerned, first week wasn't great. Started with the bankroll at $500. Now it sits at $403.10. Overall, we had 11 plays. Only one of them was actually a winner, but had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them hit the board. So 63.6% of the runners are in the money, only striking at 9% as far as the wins are concerned. There have been $131 churned. Again, the goal there is going to be to get to $10,000 churned. And the average odds of these horses is 4.3 to 1. Now, the reason I'm not terribly disappointed with the sort of lack of success with the first week is I really think at least 2 of these horses that ran and hit the board were good enough and probably should have won. And that's not including a horse like Zestful at Santa Anita on Friday afternoon, who really ran, I thought, a pretty solid race, but got beat by an exceptional effort from Publilius Cyrus on the main track. The 2 horses that I'm speaking of, and I have them already in my horse watch for when they come back. Noble Indy, the number 2, I don't know if he was claimed out of his start at Gulfstream or not. I can take a look at that. But I thought, given the trip and him having to wait the way that he did, and eventually when he got out and the way that he kicked, I really think he was the best in that race. And had he had clean run, I think he would have prevailed. Instead, he hits the board at odds of 5 to 2. It is what it is. It's a loss as far as this game is concerned. The other horse that I really genuinely believe would have won, and it's easy to sit here and say that, and perhaps, I'm sure someone's going to look at it and say there's some sort of a bias. I happen to think Legendary Prince would have won that turf sprint on Saturday afternoon at 12 to 1 had he not had I'm going to call it an unfortunate trip and a less than stellar ride. I believe, and I'm not going to name who the rider was in case I'm incorrect in who it was. I think it's someone. I believe it was a family member. I think if he had just waited down on the inside, he would have had a seam that opened up as opposed to tip out 5 path at about the 8th pole, still finished with a head of steam and only lost by, I think, about a half length. It is what it is. Unfortunately, these things happen, and it's nobody's fault. It's just, I think, hindsight's 20/20. So those are 2 that I think very easily could have been winners. Again, not including Zestful, who was beaten by, I think, a head or a neck. So all in all, yeah, the numbers don't look great as far as the bankroll is concerned and the overall win percentage, but the horses are running. They're just not getting their nose down. And you know what? That happens from time to time. At least the form is solid enough. The horse that was the winner thus far, Ride a Comet, I'm very high on that horse. I know there's a chance that he runs in the Pegasus World Cup turf. To be honest, I would like to just keep him at those mile races. And I know for the males, they're kind of few and far between. But to me, he feels like a crack miler. Sure, try to stretch him out if you want. There's a ton of money there. Why not take a shot? But I get the vibe that he's going to be a crack miler going forward. He's got a big turn of foot. I just think he's a really nice horse from Mark Cassidy and company. He went off at 2 to 1 and won. There was actually, and I can try to pull this up on the fly here, had a comment, and I had mentioned to someone that I would comment or address the question on the pod this week. So we'll try to find it. Another thing that's everyone's favorite when you're listening to something and people are scrolling through and searching. Here we go. Todd Barch. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Tom. The comment, I am aware that you said wagers would be 3% of bankroll, parentheses, until a winner hit on the day, then 1%, which is what happened on Saturday. Ride a Comet won. I came back with Fighting Mad, only bet 1% on her. with the idea that you want to lock in a profit, and I think it helps just as far as overall bankroll health is concerned for the long term. It may be beneficial to list the individual wagers / returns from the previous day on each day's YouTube note. I'm needing to assume that the wagers on January 6th were $15, $15, $13 to get to the $43 total. Tom, thank you for the comment. You can, again, find all of these little videos that I've been putting out as far as the horses. If I haven't written about them on racingpicks.com, they, for the most part, are put into a video that I put over on my channel. So kind of to put things, to answer that question, the first three plays actually on the first day were $15, $14, and $14. Now, the logic for me is whatever the number ends up being, so let's just say 3% of this 403 right here, do a quick mental math here, or 403.1 I should say, times 0.03, 12.09. Now, this is a very easy number. It'll be a $12 bet for the next horse that goes out. It'll probably be on Tuesday. I don't know if I'll do a video tonight or tomorrow morning, but it'll probably be on Tuesday that I put something together. It'll be a $12 wager. Now, when it gets under $12, let's say, it's into the high 11 range, I round down to the nearest whole number or full number. I don't remember which, the maths, they get you. As far as what the numbers themselves are called, integers, whatever they are. The idea is I'm going to round down. So at 11.93, instead of betting $12, I'll bet $11, and it'll stay there. Again, with the idea being just trying to preserve bankroll for the longevity and trying to make this thing last for as long as it can en route trying to get to that $10,000 churn. So those first three bets were 15, 14, and 14. Day two were 13 and 13. One of the horses was washed off the turf. You go to the next day, 12, 12, 12. And then on Saturday, 11, 11, and 4. And again, that $4 bet was 1% of the bankroll at that given time because Ride a Comet had locked in a profit for the day. So that's getting you up to speed on this. And please head on over to my YouTube channel, Matt Bernier, subscribe, the bell icon, the whole jazz, you know that deal, because that's where these videos will live. They're brief, they're very quick. I don't do anything too crazy. I try to keep it to about 2 minutes in total to go over the 2 or 3 horses that will be part of the $500 challenge for that given day. And as usual, as far as the written pieces are concerned, those will take place Thursday, Friday, Saturday, typically over on racingpicks.com. So that's the update for the $500 challenge through 1 week. We're at 403.10 with $131 churned. Hopefully we get back on the beam in good shape tomorrow afternoon somewhere, if there is something. Hopefully there'll be a video out, again, my YouTube channel. Questions, comments, concerns about the $500 challenge, about the Friday feature, Aqueduct Race 7, or about the Pegasus World Cup, the dirt or the turf, and the idea of Monomoy Girl in 2021. Beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. However you listen to this thing, whether it's audio only or on YouTube, please rate, review, and subscribe. It means a great deal to all of us. Thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you're feeling like. Either way, if you like it, great, thumbs up. If you hate it, thumbs down. That's fine, doesn't bother me. But either way, get involved. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. I will be back next Monday with episode 49 of the program, getting ready to head down to Gulfstream Park for the Pegasus World Cup. Again, you can find that on NBC. I believe it's the 23rd, if my dates are correct. It is Saturday the 23rd. So looking forward to that. Until next Monday, best of luck however you play, whatever you play, and wherever you play. This has been episode 48 of The Matt Bernier Show.